healing only comes through recognition and acceptance and responsibility. Before I start, I'd like to thank my wife, Corey, who I would never be able to tell a story if it wasn't for her. And it kind of all started with her. I spent 10 years incarcerated in Philadelphia for playing with a handgun, and I killed a friend of mine. She was a woman of color. Um, as a result, um, I was incarcerated in Smithfield Penitentiary, and kind of going into prison, I was a pretty gregarious person, um, really sort of sweet, I guess. But in prison, I had to sort of adapt certain ways of being to keep me safe. So that meant that I never really talked about myself. I kept extremely to myself. I didn't accept anything. I didn't take anything. I didn't tell people about my personal business, and I read a lot of books and kept to myself. You know, and but as you moving towards release, those things can't really work for you anymore because the situation doesn't call for it. So I was paroled um, to New York with my father, who is a hardworking Jamaican, and um, in consultation with my mom, they thought it would be best that I started anew in Philadelphia, in New York. During that time, um, I had got an associate. I earned an associate degree in prison, and I immediately applied to NYU upon my release on March 28th, 1999. Um, Great experience. I was fortunate enough to get in. I went to school, kept my head down, held down jobs, went to grad school. But all during that time, um, I was never really myself. Um, I was a shell of myself. Um, I didn't have many healthy relationships with people. I mean, I was mainly by myself because I had moved to New York and I had no social circle. So I was basically on my own to figure out how I was going to go about living my life, and which would turned out to be a really lonely life. Part um, part of my journey towards healing started with my introduction to my rabbi. While I was at NYU, in search of community, in search of building new relationships, I was introduced to this guy, and we immediately hit it off. He's an Orthodox rabbi, modern Orthodox. He's a really tall, wiry kind of person. Wears glasses. He looks like a kid, but if you want to the definition of a mensch, he's a mensch. He's a mensch. And so, during that time, learning Judaism, hanging out with Rabbi Sarna every day, and on the weekends, you know, I slowly begin to, um, like come out of my shell. Slowly started to tell him things that I had never shared with anyone else, because you know, with a record, you can make all the wonderful relationships and meaningful relationships you want. But every relationship in the back of my mind, I was thinking, if I told this person this, would they still like me? Would they still be interested in hanging with me? And so that idea really permeated my mind any time I was making friends. So I couldn't really make friends because it wouldn't allow me to. So you know, I continue on my journey. You know, I'm Jewish. I'm part of the Orthodox community. I was a Lubavitcher for about 8 years. Black hat, black, Shrimo, all the whole nine. I would be out down at 770, hanging out with Hussites. So that was really my life. And the funny thing about it was, no one ever asked me who I was. No one ever asked me where I was from. No one ever asked me, no, no, where, no, do you have family? And it's funny because they made me feel at home. I would stay in Jewish people's home with like there would be valuables laying all over the place, and they would just say, "Hey, I'm going away for Shabbos. You can stay in our house for Shabbos. Here's the keys. Make yourself at home." And it was the extreme generosity with which I was treated was extremely beautiful. So I'm dating. I don't know if anyone knows about Jewish dating. it can, it can be it can be pretty you know crazy to say the least. And I already I'm black. I'm Jewish. They don't know who this guy is. So coming from trying to date from girls, it's just very difficult. So I kind of like dialed back my practice in Lubavitch land, and I went on OK Cupid. Uh, Found a nice Jewish girl. Um, our first date was April 11th, 2011. We met for our first date at Junior's uh, cheesecake place. And so at that point, when I met Corey, my thoughts was, I am not dating anyone else that I cannot tell them that I have a criminal record. I will not. I say, I was dating. I said, I will not do it. And on the first date with Corey, exactly what I told her. I said, I was, sentenced for, 10 years for third degree murder. I've been out for about 10 years now. And she didn't really bat an eye. She didn't really bat an eye. And so as our relation progressed, Corey became pregnant with our first child, Kaya. And so for me, you know, there was only two options that was available. Two. One, I was not bringing anyone into the world without being married. My mother was married when I was born. Her mother was married when she was born. So I was not bringing a child into the world without a wedlock. And number two, I had to be married by an Orthodox rabbi because I don't know if doing it the other way would matter. So my the rabbi that I spent the most time with in Park Slope, you know, didn't really help me in trying to get this done. Corey's pregnant. She's like 7 months pregnant. She's coming close. I have to do this ASAP. So you know, I come back after a few years to Rabbi Sarna. You know, but this time it was a bit more serious and a bit more emotional because at this meeting I told Rabbi Sarna that I was incarcerated and I had this history, and it was so hard for me because I love this guy and like you can't imagine that someone you love. That if you told him something, they'll feel different, and like I have developed such a good relationship with him. So when I told him, he was like, two things, Yehuda. Um, of course, I'll marry you, and he said that I was a remarkable person. So it was it was still very emotional. So we were married on a roof, not on a roof, on a in a loft, and we surprised people. It was called we called it a wower, a shower wedding. So everyone came to the um, the wower, and everybody think, oh, it's Christmas. No, we're having a baby shower. But when the rabbi came out, the chuppah again came up, everyone was surprised. Word Corey's mother was surprised, my mom was surprised, everyone was surprised, and we got married. Um, but going, having this history, talking to my wife about it, you know, I still exhibited a lot of maladaptive behaviors that would make me a pretty difficult person to deal with. So holding all that in for all those years, not talking about myself, not, just being like standoffish, it hurt many of my relationships because I know people wanted to get close to me and I wanted to get close to them, but this history, these things were in the way. So, Corey, we have been in conversations about, my life and what I wanted to do. And she's like, you have this like history, you have this thing that probably can help people. Why are you not, promoting it? Why are you not out there? So a guy called me from Huffington Post. His name is Jason Karras. And he called me. He said, "We're doing a story on gun violence. I would like to talk to you for a segment of it." And so we talked on the phone like 3 or 4 days. And then he said, "No, no, I'm not doing it on them. I'm going to focus on you." So we did a story, and I talked about what happened in very like very um, great detail. And it was the first time that I ever talked to anyone outside of like my personal family about my history. But with that article I posted on Facebook. It was the first time that I announced to the world that I was someone who was formerly incarcerated, and I can tell you that the freedom and the weight that was lifted off me, having not to explain or having not to have this thing hidden, um, allowed me to really heal inside, to really try to move my life forward. And so, you know, you know, it's very hard to sort of um, allow your future to depend on the generosity of others. It's very hard. Um, but for me, in many ways, is the only way to go. Um, and I sort of like I'm like Barack Obama. I tend to think that people are their best selves, and they try to be their best selves. And I've learned to have a whole lot more trust in people, and I've learned to be more open with my feelings about things. So um, thank you for listening, and I appreciate it. Thank you.